Okay. Thank you, members. We're going to call a roll.
Swanson.
Present.
Morel.
Present.
Alejo.
Here.
Allen.
Here.
Furutani. Gurel. Yamada. Here. Quorum established.
Thank you very much. We have one bill today, and it is
SB 104.
SB 104, Steinberg, and we're going to have Mr. Wright make a presentation on behalf of Senate President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much.
Good morning.
Okay.
Mr. Chair and members, Senate Bill 104 is Senator Steinberg's third attempt to give the hardest working individuals in California another option to organize themselves within a union. SB 104 permits agricultural employees to select their labor representatives by submitting a petition to the Agriculture Labor Relations Board, the ALRB, along with representation cards signed by a majority of the bargaining unit. Once the validity of the cards is confirmed by the ALRB, the labor organization would be certified as the exclusive bargaining representative. Opponents to the measure oppose in part because they believe in the sanctity of the secret ballot. This bill does not eliminate the secret ballot process as a method to select labor representatives. It simply adds this new process as an option. The assumption is that all participants in these critical elections are on an even playing field. The assumption is that individuals voting in these elections conducted by the ALRB are free to contemplate the pros and cons of their decision, and that they are free to weigh the weighted influence and feelings of intimidation from their employers leading up to the election. There are countless stories of farm workers who are told that if they vote to join a union, that they will be out of a job the next day. They are told that they will be reported to immigration. They are told their family members will lose their jobs. The opposition has also argued that agricultural employees, given the option, will overwhelmingly pick this card check option over the current election process. If that is the case, it's likely due to the fact that these workers are well aware of the long history of voter intimidation on the part of employers in past ALRB elections. This is a simple, sensible bill giving farm workers another option to choose a collective bargaining representative. I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wright. And witness in support.
Buenos días. Buenos días, mi nombre es Angelina Jiménez. Vivo en Lamont, California, una comunidad de campesinos localizado al sur de Bakersfield.
Good morning. My name is Angelina Jimenez, and I live in Lamont, California, a community of farm workers south of Bakersfield.
Yo trabajo en uno de los rancheros más grandes de la uva de Guimarra. Cada año en Guimarra yo trabajo de temporada, antes de la cosecha y en la pizca, cuando las temperaturas suben a 100 grados.
I work at one of the country's biggest grape growers, Guimarra Vineyards. Every year at Guimarra, I work the pre-harvest season and the grape harvest season, when the temperatures often reach 100 degrees.
Cuando empecé a trabajar en Guimarra, me pagaban el salario mínimo. Hoy, después de 17 años, todavía sigo ganando el salario mínimo.
When I started working at Guimarra, I was paid the minimum wage. Today, 17 years later, I am still paid the minimum wage.
Como madre soltera, mi familia depende de mi salario y de mi trabajo temporal en Guimarra. Ha sido una lucha, pero gracias a Dios, mis 3 hijos están bien.
As a single mother, my family depends on my income from my seasonal work at Guimarra. It has been a struggle, but thank God my 3 children are doing well.
Mi hijo Juven trabaja en la construcción en Nuevo México. Mi hijo Gabriel trabaja en Guimarra. Mi hija Cruz Guadalupe está en el 8º grado. Mi deseo es que siga estudiando para que no trabaje en los campos de Guimarra.
My son Juven now works in construction in New Mexico. My son Gabriel works at Guimarra, and my youngest daughter, Cruz Guadalupe Martinez, she's in the 8th grade. My wish is that she continues to study so that she doesn't have to work in a place like Gomorrah.
Nuestro trabajo en el campo es peligroso.
My job in the field is very dangerous.
Fue durante la temporada del amarre en 1995 cuando me lastimé el ojo. Estaba trabajando en la viña de la uva cuando de repente una guía se soltó y me golpeó la cara, golpeándome el ojo.
It was during 1995 tying season that I suffered an injury to my eye. I was working under the grapevines when suddenly a vine whipped me in the face, striking my eye.
Me tapé el ojo y le pedí ayuda a la mayordoma. Me dijo que regresara a mi trabajo y que estaba bien. Seguí trabajando porque tenía miedo de perder mi trabajo.
I held my eye and asked my forelady for help. She told me to get back to work and that I was okay. I kept working, afraid that I would lose my job if I complained.
Después de unos días se empeoró el ojo. Me fui por mi cuenta al médico, pero era demasiado tarde.
A few days later, my eye became worse. I went on my own to the doctor, and it was too late.
Desde el 2004, 15 campesinos han fallecido. 2 de ellos fueron en los campos de Guimarra.
Since 2004, 15 farm workers have died from heat stroke. 2 died at Gomorrah.
He trabajado en Guimarra por 17 años. Las condiciones de trabajo son peores, han empeorado.
I have worked at Gomorrah for 17 years, and my work conditions have not improved. It's gotten worse.
Hemos tratado de varias veces de organizarnos en unión, pero Guimarra usa amenazas e intimidaciones para que no entre la unión en Guimarra. Sabe que nada les pasa si violan la ley.
We have tried several times to organize a union, but Gomorrah uses threats and intimidation to keep the union out. Gomorrah knows that they can get away with breaking the law.
En el 2006, un juez negó los resultados de las elecciones de unión porque Guimarra violó la ley laboral. El juez determinó que Guimarra trató de intimidar a los trabajadores porque ellos dijeron que si gana la unión, muchos perderían sus trabajos.
In 2006, a judge threw out the results of a union election held at Gomorrah because the company illegally interfered. The company tried to scare the workers by telling them that if the union won, many workers would be laid off.
Amenazaron que las viñas convertirían en vino y emplearían menos trabajadores. Los trabajadores que viven en sus casas de la compañía los perderían sus casas si ganaba la unión, y amenazaron a los trabajadores que no tienen documentos, no les regresarían su trabajo.
They threatened that the field would be converted to wine, a less labor-intensive product. Workers who live in company housing were told that they would lose their housing. Workers were also told that they would be fired for their immigration status.
Queremos que pase el trato justo para los campesinos, para protegernos nosotros mismos, y les pido a ustedes y a los congresistas voten a favor de nuestra propuesta. Gracias, y si se puede.
We need the fair treatment for farm workers so that we can protect ourselves. I ask you and all the assembly members to vote in favor of this proposal. Thank you, and si se puede. Yes, you can.
Okay, thank you very
Gracias
much.
por escucharme.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Another witness in support. We have to limit the testimony to a couple of minutes, though.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Members, Sarah Phlox. I'm here from the California Labor Federation in strong support of this bill. I'm also speaking as a former staffer of the United Farm Workers, and I've seen firsthand the intimidation, coercion, and violence faced by strawberry workers as they tried to organize a union in Salinas and Watsonville. And when any worker tries to organize a union, they face challenges, and challenges to their right and challenges to the right to have a voice on the job. The statistics are alarming. Out of Cornell, a study has shown that 92% of employers hold captive audience meetings with workers when they try to organize. 75% hire an anti-union consultant to help them try to prevent workers from organizing. Farm workers face even more challenges as a population that is majority immigrant, often limited English speakers, and often isolated in rural areas where there's not wage and hour enforcement to raise standards on the job. So this bill, we think, is a common sense measure which will extend to farm workers the right to choose whether they want to join a union and have a voice on the job, free of threats, of intimidation, and the fear that often accompanies union organizing drives. This is a right that is extended already to thousands of California workers in the private and public sector. So we urge your support of this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Other witnesses in support? Okay, witnesses in opposition?
Thank you.
Okay. I'll just... Yes, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Barry Bedwell. I'm president of the California Grape and Tree Fruit League. Our members produce fresh table grapes and deciduous tree fruit here in the state. I would like to speak in opposition to this bill, primarily addressing a couple of points that have been made. One, the sponsors and proponents of the legislation have said that this is merely an option. In reality, I would challenge anyone to understand how you would ever get to a secret ballot election if in the case of cards you had over 50%. It simply would not happen. So really what you have is a pure version of card check. Number two, they talk about the need for balance. The reality is if there is a problem with balance, we should be talking about the current law and understanding why the unfair labor practice provisions aren't doing their job. If there is intimidation, either on the part of the employer or the union, why aren't the unfair labor practice provisions being addressed? The fact is, if an employer threatens job loss, housing loss, immigration status loss, those are unfair labor practices. They need to be addressed. So in looking at the issue of intimidation, we simply have found no circumstance whereby intimidation can be avoided better than by secret ballot. To have someone not looking over your shoulder is the best way to avoid intimidation. And I want you to know, many times we're asked, as I come up here to speak, why don't you have a farm worker speaking on behalf of that point? I have to tell you, because of the fear of intimidation from the union. 5 years ago, when this was introduced, we had sworn affidavits from farm workers indicating the intimidation they had experienced at the hand of organizing individuals. This is something we need to avoid, whether it's on the part of the union or the employer. So when you take a look at this particular bill, what we should be concentrating on in debating is, if the law isn't working as intended to prevent intimidation, let's fix that. Let's not talk about balance when, in essence, by giving card check, you're not giving balance to the employee. You're giving total preference to the union. You are assuring unionization, which many times is against the wish of the individual. And let me make clear, there are the situations many times when you have a clear majority of people signing cards, and then a week later during the election, that percentage falls way below 50%. Now, the union would say, well, that's due to the balance and intimidation on the part of the employer. We would say that many times, based upon information given us, it's those cards were signed for many reasons other than wanting to become part of the union, including intimidation, misrepresentation, that has no place. in this particular law. So in summary, this is really about a piece of legislation that is clearly undemocratic, it's un-American, and it's unfair to the very individuals that deserve our respect and the dignity of producing food for the state and nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Witness in support?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Brian Little with the California Farm Bureau Federation in opposition to SB 104. Mr. Bedwell, I could save you some time, which I'm sure you'll be happy about, because Mr. Bedwell has already done an excellent job saying everything that I would have wanted to say. I would like to highlight one thing that he did mention, and that is that it's interesting to see that the proponents of the bill have finally acknowledged something that we've been saying for a while about it, and that is that it seems likely that if you finally make it to 50% of cards signed or petitions signed, that no union organizer in his right mind is going to request an election. That will become the election effectively. And it's interesting to hear that the proponents here have sort of acknowledged that fact and tried to come up with some sort of argument against it, I don't think very effectively. I also would ask why it's necessary for the committee and for the Assembly to have waived Rule 62 for public notice for this hearing today. One wonders what the hurry is and why this has to be done so quickly that we can't give the public the normal notice that they would normally be given. And one just wonders why that has to be the case. So I will stop there, and thank you for your time and your attention.
Thank you. Other witnesses in opposition?
Jennifer Barrera from California Chamber of Commerce, also in opposition.
John Hanley, California Independent Grocers Association, also in opposition.
Shirley Batchman, California Citrus Mutual, certainly concur with all of Mr. Bidwell's comments, and we are in strong opposition.
Kelly McKechnie on behalf of Western Growers, in opposition.
Crystal Jack on behalf of the Alliance of Western Milk Producers, Western Agricultural Processors Association, California Cotton Ginners and Growers Association, Nisei Farmers League, California Grocers Association, and others, all in opposition for the reasons previously stated.
Mr. Chair and members, Kendra Dijogo with the Gualco Group on behalf of the Agricultural Council of California and the California Association of Wine Grape Growers, also in opposition.
Steve Cruz with the Family Winemakers of California in opposition.
Mike Velasco, Wine Institute. Just one real quick comment why we opposed the bill. The secret ballot, the privacy of that opportunity is the only way to protect the farm worker, regardless if they want to be unionized or not, to make their own decision, without being harassed by anybody. That's why the bill is a bad bill.
Good morning. My name is Rudy Avila, and I'm not with any of those associations, but I am an ex-farm worker. I worked in the fields in 1970, 75. I was here when Mr. Cesar Chavez fought, and he was in favor of the secret ballot elections, and I think it's a slap in the face to try to take that away from what he fought for. Governor Brown was also in favor of that as well. And now I continue to work in the fields, but I work at a different capacity because I worked my way up. And I see some of the things that go on. And I believe, and I strongly believe, that the secret ballot is the way to go. There are laws already. The unfair labor practices were already mentioned. I think that if there is, in fact, abuse or if there are some incidences of intimidation or threats, then we have the avenues already to go and deal with that. So just in closing, I oppose this as an individual, I oppose this as a farm worker, and I oppose this on behalf of Mr. Chavez. Thank you.
Thank you.
Noé Cisneros with the California Farm Laborers Contractors Association, also opposed.
Thank you. Mr. Morrell, did you have a question?
A couple of questions. I do wonder why this was called without a public notice so quickly. Who makes that decision, and why did it happen so quickly?
The Speaker's office makes the decision.
Speaker, and then a question for you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Because I'm a little bit confused. One of the things you had said earlier, and again, I'm trying to simulate all these things here, is if you have that vote over 50%, I thought you had made it sound as though it would be a secret ballot, and employees would be protected. But Mr. Bedwell spoke contrary to that. Could you clarify that for me?
It would be an option in the law where it gives the opportunity, when presenting the cards to the ALRB, it is presented as the 51% that they choose to then have a secret ballot, so they make it clear to the ALRB they want to have the election. It's all in the matter of how you present it to the ALRB, or they present it to the ALRB in a fashion they say, we are going for the card check option. So when they present the bills, when they present the signed cards to the ALRB, that's when they indicate which option they want.
But wouldn't you have to admit that there is a big chance for coercion or arm twisting?
No, sir, I wouldn't.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions by Mr. Lill? Yes, Mr. Lill, your statement.
Well, first of all, I want to thank both sides for coming and sharing their perspectives in this hearing today. But I especially wanted to thank Angelina Jimenez, who came from the Central Valley, from Lamont, came a long ways. And I really wanted to thank her because it takes a lot of courage for a farm worker who's still working out in the fields to come here and be a voice for the thousands of farm workers throughout the state and to testify today why this is needed and sharing her perspectives out in the field. And I represent the Salinas Valley area, one of the richest agricultural areas in the state of California, but I also represent the thousands of hardworking and honest farm workers that toil out in the fields day after day. And so when this legislation came up, it really had a personal connection in my own life because years ago, coming from being a child and grandchild of migrant farm workers who would migrate from the Salinas Valley to the Santa Clara Valley to the Central Valley, and my family experienced some very tough conditions out in the field. There was a lot of intimidation decades ago, as there is today. They weren't paid all the wages that they were due. They were exposed to toxic pesticides, had no job security. It was very tough conditions out in the fields as migrant farm workers. And then I see it today. I used to represent farm workers. I was a legal aid attorney representing many different farm workers throughout the Monterey Bay region, and can tell you that all these conditions that were stated here today, I've seen them firsthand. And I represented workers who experienced that type of intimidation, coercion, threats, not only to themselves, but even to their families in Mexico. And so there was, and I saw this during the organizing efforts of strawberry workers in the Pajaro Valley back in 96, 97. So I really wanted to just say how important it is for farm workers to have an option to seek to come under a collective bargaining agreement and be free from that type of threats and intimidations and these captive audience meetings that are certainly held any times that farm workers begin to organize and want to be represented by a labor union. And we also know that the ALRB is limited on resources. They have new challenges in terms of carrying out traditional elections as well. But I also think that it avoids a lot of the conflicts that we see out in the fields when workers are trying to organize. As was said earlier, a lot of times outside firms are hired to try to derail those efforts. And I think that we're trying to create a process where farm workers can fully make that decision and make a decision about what's in their best interest and those of their families. And so I'm supportive of this legislation. And I just really wanted to thank, I know a few days ago we had several dozen farm workers here also supporting this effort. And I just wanted to acknowledge those many workers from my district and throughout the state that are advocating for this change in the law that would, I think, really have a substantial improvement in the lives of these hardworking people that put food on our tables.
Okay. Ms. Yamada.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for all of the testimony and for presenting the bill today on behalf of Senator Steinberg. I, too, appreciate this new option that would make choice available to those who would seek to make their voices heard. I also represent an area that has a large number of agricultural producers, and I always find it disheartening to see that it always seems that we have the support side with a usual group and the opposition side, a usual group. My position on that would be, if there is nothing to fear, then why is there such great opposition? I think this is just a common sense advance in bringing this into the 21st century. I was interested to hear the testimony of the gentleman who indicated that Cesar Chavez was a strong proponent of secret ballot, and this action would somehow besmirch that legacy. I would think if Cesar was alive today, he would be encouraging greater opportunities for democratic participation. And so with that, I will certainly be in support of the bill when it is properly motioned and seconded. I would like to second it, actually, if that is Mr. Alejo. Was that a motion?
I'll move the bill.
I would be pleased to second. But, I did want to raise one point, and that is I remember in the discussions that we had in this committee last year, before some of our new members were with us, that we recall that the 1935 National Labor Relations Act specifically excluded agricultural workers and domestic workers from certain protections, and that's why California has, I think, always taken the lead to be better than what the federal law provides. I see this as another step. But one person really stands out in my mind every time, bills like this come forward. And that is of an older farm worker who I used to pass on a road, just left out on the road there with, boxes of strawberries or boxes of oranges, with no shade, no water, nowhere to sit. And I just wonder, why that was allowed to happen. Now, should I have stopped on the side of the road to ask him? I would be a little afraid for him because he clearly was there. Somebody dropped him off there to sell these products by the side of the road. But, that seems to me just a modern day sort of indentured servitude. I don't think that anyone who was under the protection of the union or had some sort of protection from their employer would be just left out there on the side of the road with nothing to sell those products to weekend warriors driving by on a country road. So it is in that spirit that I hope that we will see improvements for all people, for both employers as well as employees. Thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Morrell had two quick questions. Sure.
Hopefully they're quick. Sir, I just have a couple of questions if you'd accept the following amendments, and that would, first of all, allow the use of card check for decertification of the unions.
I cannot accept any amendments today. I have not given that authority from my boss, the senator.
Could you ask him then about possibly applying the new penalty for the $20,000 for repeatedly committing unfair labor practices to the unions as well as to the growers?
I will ask him, yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Seeing other statements by members, let me just say that I represent a port city, Oakland, California, and the agricultural industry is very important to not only my city and region, but to the state of California. This issue has been before us for many, many years. I've had family members who have also worked in the fields, and I think that President Steinberg has presented this bill before this committee while I have served as chair a number of times now. This is absolutely no secret that there have been these issues. We've also had testifying before this committee some growers who have gone out of their way to try to treat their workers with decency and respect, and have tried to make sure that their working conditions were humane and fair. The industry, I think, has for a number of years now missed an opportunity to set the standard, making sure that there was shade, water, restrooms, and the working conditions were decent. and that this is a very important element in this industry, this multi-billion-dollar industry. The labor of these workers was respected and appreciated. And so we're at this moment. And I still think that the industry going forward has an opportunity to set a standard that's consistent with the importance of the service that the industry provides. And so, so it's without any hesitation at all that I recommend an aye vote on this moving forward, because this is an important industry for California, but every aspect and everyone that contributes to this industry, this important industry, should be respected. And I think that's what we're talking about here. So with that, please call the roll.
Swanson.
Swanson, aye.
Swanson, aye. Morel? Morel, no. Alejo? Aye. Alejo, aye. Allen? Aye. Allen, aye. Furutani? Aye. Furutani, aye. Grell? Yamada? Aye. Yamada, aye. The bill is out.
Thank you very much. The bill is out.
Thank you, members.
Senator, for the bill.
Yes, sir.
That concludes the agenda for the meeting. The meeting stands adjourned.